Live with the latest coverage from the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill. We know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Eric Ham, and we're coming to you live from Washington, D.C. A busy day with lots to cover from the United States and around the world, but first, a look at the latest headlines. Republican Vice Presidential candidate J.D. Vance says Donald Trump did not lose the 2020 election. This as Donald Trump continues to falsely claim that the 2020 election outcome was the result of extensive voter fraud. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin confirms the United States conducted precision strikes on Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen. The U.S. Air Force deployed B-2 stealth bombers to destroy a Houthi weapons storage facility. Australia announces a weapons package worth $245 million for Ukraine. The military aid includes 49 American-made Abrams tanks and ammunition. Niger's military junta renamed streets and monuments bearing French names to honor local heroes instead. Niger's military ruler says it's the first step to cutting links with the country's colonial past. And Guyana sees the fastest growth in GDP per capita in the world over the past decade. The Latin American nation's oil production grew 425% from 2020 to 2023, making it the biggest contributor to the country's growing economy. We begin with the race for the White House, where former President Donald Trump declared himself the father of IVF during an all-women town hall on Wednesday. Speaking to an audience in Georgia, Donald Trump said he supports the fertility treatment even as Democrats claim he put IVF under threat. The former president said, quote, "We really are the party of IVF. We want fertilization, and it's all the way, and the Democrats tried to attack us on it, and we're out there on IVF even more than them." IVF, or in vitro fertilization, is a fertility treatment that involves combining a woman's eggs with a man's sperm in a laboratory to create embryos that are then transferred to the woman's uterus. However, it became a hot-button issue this year when Alabama Supreme Court ruled that frozen embryos are in fact children and destroying them would be considered a wrongful death. The ruling made reproductive health advocates furious and ultimately forced Alabama's Republican lawmakers to pass a bill giving protection to healthcare providers and patients. At the time, Donald Trump quickly distanced himself from the controversy to ensure the trust of women supporters.
For IVF, and I've been looking at it, and what we're going to do is for people that are using IVF, which is fertilization, the government is going to pay for it, or we're going to get or mandate your insurance company to pay for it, which is going to be great. We're going to do that.
However, Vice President Kamala Harris suggests her Republican rival would support conservative policies pertaining to reproductive rights if he's reelected to office. On Wednesday, the Democratic presidential nominee said Donald Trump's comments were bizarre and the reality of his actions would be harmful to the women of America.
So, Donald Trump, I found it to be quite bizarre. Actually, he called himself the father of IVF. And if what he meant is taking responsibility, well, then yeah, he should take responsibility for the fact that 1 in 3 women in America lives in a Trump abortion ban state. What he should take responsibility for is that couples who are praying and hoping and working toward growing a family have been so disappointed and harmed by the fact that IVF treatments have now been put at risk. What he should take responsibility for is what we have been seeing across the country since he hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court and they undid the protections of Roe v. Wade.
During Wednesday's town hall, Donald Trump also criticized some states for placing tough restrictions on abortion and called for those laws to be amended. Now, it's worth noting that the ex-president himself appointed 3 Supreme Court judges who were instrumental in overturning Roe v. Wade, arguing that the issue should be left to the states to handle. In recent weeks, Donald Trump has backed exceptions on abortion bans such as incest, sexual assault, or danger to the mother's life. However, almost every poll shows that American women prefer Kamala Harris over Donald Trump on abortion, which is one of the top issues in the upcoming election. And staying with the race for the White House, Vice President Kamala Harris sat down for an interview with conservative-leaning Fox News for the first time on Wednesday. The interaction was mostly heated as the vice president and Fox News anchor Bret Baier clashed over immigration, gender transition, Joe Biden's presidency, and former President Donald Trump. Kamala Harris showed sympathy for American women murdered by undocumented migrants and remained diplomatic on gender-affirming care for inmates. The vice president expanded on comments she made last week when she said she would not have done anything different from President Biden during his 4 years in office. The Democratic presidential nominee clarified that she would in fact bring fresh ideas to the table as she represents a new generation of leadership. While the host talked over her answers repeatedly, Kamala Harris slammed her rival Donald Trump's threat of using the military against his political adversaries. After the interview, Donald Trump took to social media to call Kamala Harris totally incompetent. Now, just before the interview, Kamala Harris spoke at a rally in Pennsylvania where she appealed to Republican voters who are not satisfied with Donald Trump's campaign.
And now, the baton is in our hands. So I am joined today by over 100 Republican leaders from across Pennsylvania and across our country who are supporting my candidacy for President of the United States. And I am deeply honored to have their support.
The vice president called Donald Trump's behavior anti-democratic and said it goes against the American Constitution.
Now, I say all that to make an obvious point. In a typical election year, you all being here with me might be a bit surprising, dare I say unusual. But not in this election. Not in this election. Because at stake in this race are the democratic ideals that our founders and generations of Americans before us have fought for. At stake in this election is the Constitution of the United States, its very self. We are here today because we share a core belief that we must put country before party.
Poll averages by the New York Times show a neck-and-neck battle between the two presidential hopefuls, with Kamala Harris leading Donald Trump in 5 out of the 7 swing states. Meanwhile, a YouGov poll suggests Kamala Harris holds a 4-point percentage lead over Donald Trump nationally. And both candidates are trying to energize their respective bases with just 19 days to go as the race for the White House turns into a nail-biter. And now to Europe, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has unveiled his highly anticipated victory plan aimed at ending the war with Russia. Addressing the parliament in Kyiv, President Zelensky outlined 5 key points that he believes could bring the conflict to an end as soon as next year.
We, Ukrainians, together with our partners, must change the circumstances so that the war ends regardless of what Putin wants. We must all change the circumstances so that Russia is forced to peace.
Now, central to the plan is Ukraine's formal invitation to join NATO, alongside the lifting of restrictions of using Western-supplied long-range weapons to strike deep inside Russian territory. President Zelensky emphasized Ukraine's refusal to cede any territory or sovereignty and stressed the need to maintain military operations within Russia's western regions to prevent future threats. The plan also calls for a strategic deterrent package on Ukrainian soil, as well as joint protection of Ukraine's natural resources by the United States and the European Union. After outlining the plan, President Zelensky also criticized Russia's allies, China, Iran, and North Korea, calling them a coalition of criminals.
In the coalition of criminals alongside Putin, North Korea is now involved. The Kim family, which keeps more than 20 million Koreans enslaved. Our intelligence is recording not only the transfer of weapons from North Korea to Russia, but also the transfer of people. This marks the participation of a second state in the war against Ukraine on Russia's side. Everyone can see the Iranian regime's support for Putin, as well as China's cooperation with Russia.
Now, after Zelensky announced the proposal, the Kremlin swiftly dismissed the plan. Moscow accused the Ukrainian leader of pushing NATO toward a direct conflict with Russia.
This is not a Zelensky victory plan. This is a plan for the misfortune of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. All this is aimed at another extortion of money and the presentation of their terrorist capabilities. The so-called plan contains 5 points. Another hysteria about inviting Ukraine to NATO, which from Zelensky's point of view should become, as he said, evidence of determination, and will show how partners see Ukraine in the security architecture.
Now, despite Russian objections, President Zelensky remains confident in his proposal and will present the plan at the upcoming EU summit in Brussels. In fact, he's already shared the plan with President Joe Biden and key European leaders, receiving positive feedback from various allies.
The two leaders also will discuss the leader-level Ukraine Defense Contact Group, which will be held next month to continue to get Ukraine the support it needs to prevail in this conflict.
On the victory plan, this is clearly Ukraine's victory plan, which we, of course, take note of. We will discuss. There are many items on that agenda which we will have to really deepen out, understand what is behind it. This is something which will take place behind closed doors, also with allies. So I will not comment on every element in the plan, but it is of course a strong signal from Zelensky and his team that they designed this plan, that they are now taking it forward.
Meanwhile, the White House has announced a new $425 million military aid package for Ukraine, which includes air defense systems and long-range weapons. While President Zelensky hopes his plan will secure lasting peace, concerns remain in Washington about its lack of a comprehensive strategy and the potential for escalating tensions with Russia as the 2024 presidential election approaches. And now moving to Australia, where Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is making waves, not with policy, but with property. As the country grapples with a housing crisis and skyrocketing living costs, Albanese has splurged on a clifftop mansion worth a cool $2.9 million. While millions of Aussies are struggling to find affordable homes, their leader kicks back with panoramic views on the Central Coast. Critics say it's a move that's out of touch and tone deaf, but Albanese insists he knows what it's like to struggle. Here's more on the story.
Australia is facing a housing crisis. Property prices are through the roof, and affordable rentals are becoming as rare as gold dust. But guess who's feeling pretty comfy? Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. While millions of Aussies are struggling to make ends meet, Albanese has just splurged on a clifftop mansion worth a whopping $2.9 million. Yes, you heard that right. A 4-bedroom luxury pad with jaw-dropping views of the Central Coast. The timing of the purchase also couldn't be worse, just months out from an election where housing and cost of living issues are set to dominate. Now, let's be clear. Everyone has a right to own property. But the outrage isn't just about the house. It's the fact that Albanese, the leader of a country battling a housing affordability nightmare, thinks now is a good time to buy a multi-million-dollar mansion. It's a move that his opponents say has left Australians gobsmacked.
People have had 12 interest rate increases under this government, and interest rates should come back as they're doing in the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada and New Zealand. But because of Mr Albanese's bad economic management, we're seeing inflation remain higher here, and therefore interest rates remain higher as well.
The Prime Minister, though, is standing his ground. In response to the backlash, he reminded Australians that he knows what it's like to struggle. He shared a heartwarming anecdote about growing up in public housing, stating that he wants to help all Australians get into homes.
Well, Jodie and I are getting married, as is known, and I'm pleased about that. And Jodie's a coastie. She's a proud coastie. She's as proud of being a coastie as Jim is here of being a Logan lifelong resident. There are 3 generations of Haydens on the coast there, and when your relationship changes, your life changes and you make decisions. But what I'm focused on is making sure that everyone can get a roof over their head. I'm focused on increased public housing and social housing investment.
Touching story, right? But here's the kicker. This is the same guy buying a nearly $3 million dream home while his policies on housing reform struggle to gain traction. The Labour government has created a $10 billion fund for social and affordable housing, but so far it's hit a brick wall, largely due to opposition from the Greens and Independents who believe the government's policies are overambitious. Greens MP Max Chandler-Mather didn't miss his chance to land a blow, pointing out the irony. He said this purchase underscores the need for housing reform and renter protections. Meanwhile, Liberal Senator Jane Hume took a swing at the timing, calling it tone-deaf. But even with his opponents throwing shade, Albanese seems to be leaning back and enjoying those panoramic views.
I have, of course, I am much better off. As a Prime Minister, I earn a good income. I understand that. I understand that I've been fortunate. But I also know what it's like to struggle. My mum lived in the one public housing that she was born in for all of her 65 years. And I know what it's like, which is why I want to help all Australians into a home, whether it be public homes or private rentals or home ownership.
The cherry on top, data shows that most politicians in Australia aren't exactly feeling the housing crunch. About 95% of federal MPs own at least 2 properties and a third of them own 3 or more. So while the average Aussie is struggling to scrape together a deposit, politicians seem to be playing a different game. Albanese's cliff-top house is just the latest and the most glaring example. For a Prime Minister who claims he's one of us, this purchase feels like a PR disaster. A beautiful luxury abode that might just cost him more than he bargained for politically.
And our final story is about how former One Direction star Liam Payne's unexpected death brought a moment of unity to Argentina. Tensions in Buenos Aires were high amid ongoing protests against President Javier Milei's budget cuts. However, the singer's tragic death united competing groups as tributes poured in for the 31-year-old English singer. Here's the latest.
Ya no se van a juntar más y él no hizo más tour y no lo vamos a ver más y es la única forma en la que teníamos para vivir eso. Y ya no va a estar más y ahora qué hacemos, tío. Ay, no puede.
The world was left reeling from the unexpected and heartbreaking loss of singer Liam Payne. A former member of the iconic band One Direction, Payne was found dead outside a hotel in Buenos Aires, Argentina. His body lay lifeless beneath the third-floor balcony of his hotel room, where authorities later confirmed he had tragically fallen from.
Hola, buenos días. Recién llamé que se me acordó. Llamo del Hotel Casa Sur Palermo, Costa Rica 6032.
¿Qué sucede en el lugar, señor?
Bueno, tenemos un huésped que está sobrepasado de droga y alcohol y bueno, cuando está consciente está rompiendo toda la habitación y bueno, necesitamos que manden a alguien, por favor. Y necesitamos que nos envíen a alguien urgente porque, bueno, yo no sé si corre riesgo la vida del huésped. Está en una habitación que tiene balcón y, bueno, estamos un poco con temor de que haga algo.
The streets of Buenos Aires bore witness to an eerie and unexpected scene. As the news of Payne's death spread like wildfire, in the midst of protests against President Javier Milei's veto of crucial funding for public universities, the city's pulse changed.
Significó mucho para mí porque es una etapa donde tratás de ser parte de algo y One Direction y ser Directioner era eso en ese entonces para mí. Así que mismo cuando vinieron a Argentina, bueno, mi familia hizo mucho esfuerzo para que yo lo pudiera ver, tipo, no éramos personas muy pudientes y yo decidí tipo no ir, tipo renunciar a eso y tipo ahora este aplauso es la única vez que lo pude aplaudir, así que fue un aplauso a eso.
Early in the day, Buenos Aires witnessed impassioned demonstrations, which soon turned into an outpouring of grief as fans gathered outside the hotel to honor the fallen star. With tears streaming down their faces, they softly sang Infinity, one of One Direction's most heart-wrenching ballads. Candles flickered in the night, casting shadows over his photographs, as fans prayed for his soul to find peace. The crowd also observed a moment of silence.
Yo arranqué a escuchar a One Direction desde que tenía 11 años. Nunca los pude escuchar en vivo. Se separaron. Siempre se jodía con la vuelta, el reencuentro. Al menos simbólico, pero ya no va a poder pasar.
Não sei explicar, mas é um sentimento tão ruim, porque de certa forma ele fez parte da minha infância. Tipo assim, a banda tem um significado muito grande pra mim. E aí foi baque quando eu soube.
As Payne's body was removed by the Argentine fire brigade, fans lined the streets, their eyes never leaving the vehicle carrying away the remains of their beloved star. It was a haunting farewell, one that left the streets of Buenos Aires heavy with sorrow. The air was thick with the loss of a man who had brought so much light to so many, only to be extinguished far too soon.
Destrozada completamente. Todo esto es parte de mi infancia para mí. Yo crecí con esto, yo crecí con su música, yo crecí con la banda, con mi mejor amiga. Yo pasé muchas cosas cuando era chica y estos momentos con mi mejor amiga era escuchar su música. Hace poco iba a ir a su concierto cuando vino acá y se canceló y me quedé destrozada de que no pude verlo. Todo lo que puedo pensar es en los recuerdos de cuando yo era chica y toda la felicidad que me dio. A mí me destroza completamente toda esta situación, pero yo necesitaba estar acá.
The grief extended beyond Argentina. Celebrities, musicians, and fans from all corners of the globe took to social media to express their disbelief and sorrow. Platforms like Spotify and Billboard paid their tributes, while industry giants like rapper Flavor Flav, Juicy J, Quavo, Charlie Puth, and music producer Zedd mourned Payne's passing publicly. Liam Payne's rise to fame was nothing short of meteoric. As a teenager, he auditioned for the X Factor UK, where fate brought him together with 4 other boys to form One Direction in 2010. The members were Niall Horan, Harry Styles, Louis Tomlinson, and Zayn Malik. A band that redefined pop music for a generation. They disbanded in 2016. In his final act, Payne unknowingly brought a fractured city together. The protests may have gone quiet, but his voice will forever resonate, not only in the songs he left behind, but in the hearts of those who loved him. Liam Payne was more than a star. He was a beacon of hope for a generation, a man whose light will never truly fade, even as the world says goodbye.
That does it for us today. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks everyone again for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
Kamala, you're fired!
I say, bring it on.
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill. We know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on First Post America.